Welcome to another episode of Your Soul Transformation Podcast. I am your host, Dimple Bindra, and today I have an exceptional therapist on our show. Her name is Justine Trumbetas. Justine is a licensed mental health therapist and certified integrative mental health professional with over 7 years of experience. With a master's in clinical counseling, she is passionate about holistic wellness, blending traditional therapy with holistic principles. Justine focuses on the synergy of nutrition, movement, and mindset and mental health, guiding her clients on a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. She has now expanded her expertise as a holistic life coach, committed to helping individuals achieve greater harmony in their lives. And today we are going to talk about narcissistic mothers and how narcissistic mothers really affect their children's lifestyles and all that good stuff. So please help me welcome Justine.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Dimple. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful, Justine. Happy New Year's to you and to your family. And
Thank
our
you.
and our audience is like super excited because this is a topic that it's totally unaddressed, and I feel that you are the expert at it. So can I go ahead and ask you my first question?
Go for it.
How do you define narcissism in the context of maternal relationships, and what are its most common manifestations?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So typically with most narcissists, but since we're talking about the mother who can possibly be a narcissist, typically what you want to look for is how self-involved are they with themselves? Do they see their children as an extension of themselves? Or do they perhaps see them as their own individual? So
Mm.
typically with the narcissistic mother, what you're going to see is a lot of emotional abuse, and it's typically done within the home. You don't really see this out in public. So the narcissistic mom might look perfect to someone who doesn't really know what's going on behind the scenes in the home, because that ideal image is so important as well for the narcissistic mother with herself and as well with her children. So typically what tends to happen is the mother at some point becomes more controlling than before. And that is typically when the child has a voice, when the child has an opinion. That is when you really get to see the true narcissism of a mother. That narcissistic rage even can start to happen at such a young age just because the child has a different thought or opinion than the mom. And the narcissistic mother truly cannot understand why they think differently than them, because you are me. So why do we think differently? This is how you need to think. And this is where lots of confusion and self-esteem can happen in a relationship at such a young age.
Oh, wow. That actually reminds me of my dad. I'm sorry. I know we're talking about narcissistic mothers, but sounds like, well, I'm sure narcissistic fathers also have similar patterns, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Patterns, unfortunately,
Mm.
where you might feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells in the home, and you have to predict your parents' mood before they come home from work. Things like that you might start to be aware of and start to do at such a young age, trying to say, okay, what kind of mood is this person going to be in? What do I need to do so I don't get the wrath of the narcissist? But of course, at that age, you're not understanding it's narcissism.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is great. Okay, so we'll stick with mothers. So can you explain how having a narcissistic mother can affect an individual's mental health and well-being, especially because I know you are a therapist, you have so many clients that probably deal with such issues. So what really happens in that person's mental health and well-being if they have such parents that are still alive and maybe controlling, is what I'm thinking. That's the first thing they probably do. So yeah, over to you.
Yeah. So the mental health, unfortunately, low self-esteem is one of the major ones. Emotional, let me start that one over. So it typically leads to emotional trauma and
Mm.
also very low self-esteem. In women, females, the daughter tends to develop body image issues, disordered eating, to control something in a situation that they can't control. Or unfortunately, sometimes on a side note, the mom does put on to the child their body image issues or their disordered eating, and then that child develops it as well. So that's another common issue that you will tend to find with daughters and mothers in that type of relationship. And of course, you will unfortunately have depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations as well for someone who is unaware and even aware that their parent, mother, is a narcissist as well. You can have very unhealthy relationships, especially with friends. You might feel like everyone is out to get you, or everyone's not there to be kind to you. So you're going to have this wall up and not really quite sure why you don't have all these friends like someone else would. And it's because you first relationship you had with the female wasn't the healthiest. And that's what you learned that would be in that relationship with that female is perhaps spitefulness or insecurities, feeling jealous as well, which is a huge thing with a narcissistic mother and her children, is feeling jealous of their children as well.
Damn. Okay. Wow. So, in your practice, how do you integrate holistic principles while addressing the challenges posed by narcissistic maternal relationships?
Yes. So I typically first ask, how much water are you drinking? I know that's a silly question to ask, yes, but
Cool.
there's so much just to water that people don't understand, because one thing I teach clients to do is reparent themselves. And that starts with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you really think about that. So you want to look at food, water, safety. Do you feel safe? Are you getting enough good, nutritious food? And are you getting enough water? And if the answer is no, then it's not much. We can still work on a lot of things, but if you're not properly hydrating your body for your mental health and your physical health, if you're not in a safe environment to do these things and apply these skills you're going to learn in therapy, then it might not be the best situation for you. So you do want to start at the bottom and work your way up to the top of what healing looks like for you. And that's going to be different for each individual as well.
Got it. And you also mentioned, I was curious, you mentioned about the mother does not have a good relationship with, let's say, their children, daughter or son, and they pass on a lot of their emotional trauma onto their children.
We do. So typically, one thing that most people don't talk about with a narcissist is that they have their own trauma, and it typically starts in their childhood for the most part. And what tends to happen is they don't get the unconditional love that we all deserve, that we all need to be healthy individuals that know what healthy love is, so we can give it to others and give it to ourselves. So if the narcissistic mother had her trauma, and it goes on and on and on, and that is what we can call generational trauma, family trauma. And what tends to happen is you'll start to see pattern, like maybe you start to see, maybe my grandmother wasn't the best, and I would see these snide comments and remarks that she would make to my mom. I just never really paid attention to it because that was my norm. So unfortunately, yes, she does pass it on to her children. And what tends to happen is there tends to be one black sheep in the family that gets the brunt of it. There's typically one golden child if there's more than one child in the family. So it's typically not all of it, but most of it is on one child, where that child takes on all that emotional pain that the mother is holding on to from her childhood. And if that child can figure out what's going on, they then can break those chains and work on themselves. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of over the last couple of years, which is fantastic to see these people coming in to heal their own trauma, to stop this generational trauma from happening.
And I'm curious about the next question, which is, can a narcissistic mother give birth to a narcissistic daughter or son?
Yes, it can happen. It can happen, yes, where I've actually met a narcissistic mother who her own mother was a narcissist as well. So that can happen depending on the relationship and the choices that child does make through their whole lifetime. So it could be their peer group. It could be when they move out of the home as well. Typically, the person who wants to break those chains doesn't really realize what's happening, but they want to just get out of that house as soon as possible. They can't figure out why, but they just want to get out as soon as possible. And if you break yourself away from that, or if you learn a different way, or if you're defiant and you're questioning things, then perhaps that's not going to happen. So the other thing that tends to happen, which is not talked about much, is complex PTSD. That typically is what tends to happen, unfortunately, as well, when you are raised from a narcissistic mother, just because of the emotional toll it can take on your soul and your body.
Wow. Okay. Could you discuss the role of nutrition and physical movement in healing from trauma of a narcissistic maternal relationship?
Yes, yes. So often, not all the time, children of a narcissistic mother aren't given the tools they need to actually be healthy humans. So it could be what they're eating, how they're sleeping, what they're wearing, to skincare, to washing themselves or shaving, to hygiene, feminine products as well, not learning these things, unfortunately, because a narcissistic mother needs to be better than her children all the time. So when it comes to nutrition and movement, that is one of the first things I do talk about and assess for as well, because that movement is so powerful at a cellular level to heal trauma, because we do hold trauma at a cellular level. So if we're moving our body, getting all of that fuzz out of our body that doesn't need to be there all the time, and perhaps incorporating yin yoga, restorative yoga, things like that can be very helpful to heal the body and to start healing even generational trauma, if that is your intention going into that practice as well. When it comes to food, if you're not educated on how food affects your mood, it will still affect you, especially if you're still eating perhaps processed foods or foods that your parents even thought were fine for you growing up because they truly thought so. So sometimes it's not out of harm, sometimes it's just not knowing. So if you start to nourish your body with good foods and care for it, you start to see the difference mentally, physically, emotionally within yourself. And you start to care for yourself, build self-esteem, healthy self-love. Depression and anxiety can decrease drastically just by changing your food and movement, and of course your water intake as well.
This is amazing. Thank you. I'm sure this really helps, because people, even though we feel like, yeah, everyone's talking about food and water, okay, what's the big deal? But when it comes to these complex relationships, you're saying that this is a good way to really take care of yourself, because maybe growing up you didn't have the right, choices to eat because your mom fed you whatever she thought is right for you, which typically I have heard, and you probably can correct me, leads to a lot of illnesses, like food illnesses, right? Or food disorders that girls, women, especially me, I would do a lot of binge eating and I was overweight, so they start developing these crazy habits, right? Either binge eating or throwing up or being an anorexic. Is that interrelated?
It can be, especially if you're not learning properly why we eat certain foods or why foods aren't good for us. So we're not restricting. I don't talk about restricting or anything like that when it comes to nutrition and your food. What I'm really focusing on is what's going to make you feel good and what's going to help your brain grow. Because I want a fat brain for myself and my clients, and I want it to be big, because our brain starts to shrink at around the age of 30, I believe, a little bit older than that. So we want to be working out. We want to be eating good foods because of that reason as well. There's so much to it when we talk about food that people really don't understand until they go down those rabbit holes on their own and like, oh, wow, okay, maybe I won't eat this much of this, or maybe I'll eat less of this and add more of this to my diet as well. And when we start to do that, we start to heal ourselves from the inside out, and we can really start to love ourselves even more than we do now by putting those foods in our body.
Makes total sense. Yeah. Okay. What about mindset? Like, what mindset shifts are crucial for someone trying to heal from the impact of such a relationship, especially with their mother?
Boundaries. That's one thing I teach in the beginning, is healthy boundaries, placing boundaries for yourself and around others, especially your mother, especially your parents. or your boss at work, even as well. But even with yourself, are you making yourself stay up till 12 o'clock for no reason? Set that boundary for yourself. Get up on a decent time as well. Reparenting yourself once again in that way. So besides setting healthy boundaries, you also want to refrain your negative thoughts. And that is when the cognitive distortions play in with this, self-defeating thoughts. So if I'm hearing a client say, I'm always messing up, I can never do anything right, I should be eating healthier, I'm going to take out certain words and educate them on how it's affecting their mental health and the way they view themselves and their mindset. The third thing I think about too, or educate my clients about, is whose voice are you actually hearing? Not about hearing voices, but are you hearing your mom's voice talk to you like that? Is that actually your mom speaking to you? Is that you? And when they can see the difference in that, they take that power back. And it's so fast and quick when they start to see that as well within themselves.
I love that. I love that you teach them to check in with their thoughts and not believe every thought that they're thinking, because not every thought that they're thinking is even true.
Not even true. It's not even their thought. It might be someone who kept telling them, repeating the same thing over and over again, like you're not good enough, or you're lazy, or you're fat, or you're too skinny, or you're stupid. Whatever that thing is that their mother said to them, they might still say to themselves. So you definitely want to separate that and work on those negative thought patterns that we all tend to have at some point.
So how would somebody even know that their mothers are narcissistic? Not every mom is going to go into a therapist or psychologist and get them self-diagnosed, right? So what steps can people take just to see, hey, my mom is a narcissistic. What characteristics do they play or show in family?
The common ones that I tend to see if I'm asking questions just to quickly see maybe this is what's happening here within the family, which is a really weird one, but do they give you really strange gifts? Or do they go way over the top with their gifts to brag about it? It could be something that doesn't relate to you, like they don't know who you are. I've heard of like broken hangers and light bulbs and things like that, to really extravagant gifts to share and post to say, look how good I am. This is what I give to my kids as well. So that's one strange thing. And it's about that entitlement or that praise that they want, that attention, or it's about taking that power and control of watching that person open that gift and seeing that reaction of like, I didn't ask for this, or what is this? This is not who I am as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a strange one I like to share with people because I get a lot of yeses for that one. Other ones that are typical as well is, do they tend to talk about themselves constantly? So you talk about yourself and then all of a sudden it's all about them. You have no idea how it even got into them. They tend to play victim 100% of the time. 100% of the time. Maybe 90, we'll say 90%. Just to be fair, but I have seen consistently with people I have met who are narcissists as well, me trying to work with them or reconcile with them about something, and then they just play the victim and nothing ever gets done because they don't know how to work on themselves. Other things that tend to happen is around holidays, special events, it could be even a wedding. They tend to make that about themselves. So some type of drama might happen, they might get sick, or they might start a fight, or they might become victim once again around those special times because, wait a second, the attention's not on me, so let's make it happen. And something tends to happen, some type of drama around the holidays as well. So those are some interesting ones I like to share so people can understand that it is at a deeper level as well. And typically their intentions aren't out of being genuine. It's about, what am I going to get out of this? So their whole thing's against you as well. So they might do something kind for you, but say, well, I did this for you. How dare you do that? How dare you not help me when I helped you your whole life? I gave birth to you. That's a common one that narcissistic mothers would say to their child. Or, I'm just doing this to help you. I'm just saying this to help you. And it's typically something mean and not helpful for that person to hear as well, or you're remembering it wrong. So lots of gaslighting can happen as well, where you start to think that you're crazy, almost, whenever really it's your mother, that person in front of you, gaslighting you or manipulating the situation to take that control.
That actually brings me to something that I just recently came across, and maybe you can help because this probably happens to a lot of people. So imagine narcissistic mother has two children, and one child really is just gave in, their entire life for the mother. But the other child is like the black sheep, does not listen to the mother, nothing. Can a narcissistic mother ever start separating the two children?
Great question, actually. Glad you brought that up. That does happen with or that example, actually.
Yeah.
So they start to pivot the children against each other. So they don't have each other to lean on. So there's no unity even within the children because, oh, if I do this, well, my sibling might tell on me, or I want to be the better child, perhaps, so I don't get yelled at tonight, or I want to be the favorite because it feels good to get that attention, that good, healthy attention at that age. So that's a great question because there's a lot of triangling, a lot of pivoting against the children, a lot of talking about the siblings behind the back. And then that's when a lot of other issues can happen as well.
So is that called like a flying monkey? Is what I heard?
It can be, actually, yeah. So the flying monkeys are the ones that tell the child to be the better person. Oh, your mother, just talk to her. She knows, you know better, just be the better person. So that could be a flying monkey, or the sibling can be if they're not against you, but they're in favor of the narcissistic mother and saying, just let her have her thing and enabling that behavior as well.
Thank you. This actually is amazing. Whatever you're saying, oh my goodness, it makes a lot of sense. Like we are dealing with this in our society for so long, but we don't even recognize these patterns. Nobody goes into a therapist's office and says, hey, can you please diagnose me? What's wrong with me? That brings me to my next question, which is, can you share a success story or a case study where someone overcame the challenges of narcissistic maternal relationship?
Yeah, I see it quite often, actually. What tends to happen is when they start to realize, okay, this is who this person is, they heavily do all this research on what narcissism is, and they understand, okay, I can't have an emotional conversation that's going to actually heal this relationship where I feel good at the end of it. So that's when a lot of healing starts to happen. And what typically tends to happen, I see it over and over again when they start to do that work and realize what's going on, is what I hear is, I feel nothing when so-and-so says this to me. When they try to hurt my feelings, I know what's happening and I feel nothing, or I'm smiling, or I'm just amused by it now. So that is like not always what I'm aiming for, just so you know, or what I want my clients to feel, but when they don't feel trapped or helpless or struggling, that is what I want to hear. And that's what typically tends to happen when you really start to work on perhaps terms like gray rocking, you being really boring in front of that narcissist, so they don't have nothing to use against you, and you're just talking about the weather and things like that. So typically what I see, and I've seen it a dozen times perhaps now, is they tend to feel more in control, more in power, and they start to love themselves at a deeper level that they didn't think was possible. And they start to realize it was never them. They were always loved. They were always welcomed everywhere. It was someone else making them feel like that. And that's what also tends to happen, is they get their power, their control back, and that self-esteem, that body image tends to also dissipate as well.
And is it okay for us to literally go out to our mothers if our mother is a narcissist and be like, Mom, you are a narcissist? Can we ever say that to them?
No.
No, it won't work, huh?
It won't work. Yeah, that's a good question. I would love for that to be the case and then be like, oh, yes, I will change everything about myself, if that was a response. But typically it's, no, you're the narcissist. How dare you call me this when this is not who I am? Because I'm doing nothing wrong. They truly don't sometimes see that they are the ones wrong because they're so comfortable or so used to being that victim and having that mindset. The other thing they unfortunately can't have is empathy. That's a huge thing as well. If the narcissist doesn't have empathy, how much of a relationship do you think you're going to be able to have with that person that is actually healthy and genuine?
Wow. Any last additional steps or tips that you have, Justine, for anyone that just recently finds out, or maybe just after hearing you, she or he is like, damn, my mom is a narcissist. Now what do I do? So what's the first thing that they should do immediately?
Get validation. I would encourage them to join some type of Facebook group. Actually, I'm not huge on social media all the time, but there's so many different things that can be helpful on Facebook. So there are groups out there called Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers. And I would encourage you so you don't feel alone, because that's the last thing you need to feel is alone in this moment when you truly aren't, because it's so interesting when you start to read other people's stories. It's almost like the same person you're dealing with in a way. It's very interesting. So finding a community so you don't feel alone, and learning certain terms like gray rocking. So you stop speaking less to that person until you find the tools to heal and to cope with those triggers or things that start to give you that high anxiety, or that maybe you start to lose your temper quick when you see that person. So those are some things as well to be mindful of.
Thank you. This really, really helps. And how can our audience reach you, Justine?
Yeah, so if you want to reach me for therapy, you could go to www.justinetrumbetas.com. And that's where you can find me if you want to start therapy. And I do more than narcissistic mothers as well, teaching clients how to work or heal from that. I also work with anxiety, self-esteem, depression, ADHD, and I also teach about food and mood as well with my clients.
Thank you, Justine. It was wonderful having you on our podcast, and we wish you all the best. And I'm sure that our audience will really reach out to you if they need any support, because you are really shining the light and you're showing daughters of narcissistic mothers, or even sons of narcissistic mothers, that they have a way to heal, and it starts with them, and it starts with self-love.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. And to all of our listeners, always remember, metamorphosis, not medication. Namaste.